Hello, welcome everyone. I'm Jan Irwin, Head of Education at the Ulrich Museum. We are delighted to have all of you join us for the second in a series of book discussions exploring themes of heroism and leadership, identity and family, politics and religion, and the routines of everyday life. Inspired by our ongoing Ulrich and Artist in You community billboard project on view throughout Wichita, July through November. Thank you to all of the donors who made the billboard project possible, and to Humanities Kansas for grant funding in support of programming like this that accompanies this project. If you would like to learn more about the billboard project or the full lineup of upcoming Ulrich virtual programs, please visit our beautifully redesigned website. There you will find maps of the billboard locations, in-depth information on the works of art featured, ways you can use the Smartify app, and links to the Spotify playlists curated by KMUW's Jed Bodwin to listen to while you drive, walk, or bike through Wichita to see the billboards each month. Our next Ulrich virtual program is with Los Angeles-based artist Gojin Fujita on Tuesday, September 15th at 6 p.m. Fujita's work, Kiss Crew, was revealed last week at 1500 North Broadway. We will also have artist talks with Terry Evans, Jane Quick-to-See Smith, and many others coming up in the weeks and months ahead. You can register for each of these easily by visiting the program page on our website. I hope you will join us October 13th to discuss our next book in the series, A Girl is a Body of Water by Jennifer Nansabuga Makumbi. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Beth Golay, the host of the KMUW podcast Marginalia, creator of the podcast You're Saying It Wrong, NPR Story Lab Workshop team member on the award-winning podcast My Fellow Kansans, producer of Cooking with Fire and An Artist's Perspective, and KMUW's Director of Marketing and Digital Content. And I will now turn it over to Beth, who will be joined by our very special guest, Christopher McDougall. Beth and Christopher.
Hey, all right. Hi.
Hi.
I changed my backdrop.
You did.
Yeah. A great feat of engineering on my behalf.
Well, thank you all for being here. I'm just trying to quickly see how many attendees we have and who else here. I'm afraid I did not prepare an introduction for you, Christopher. People probably best know you as the author of Born to Run, and you are joining us tonight because of you're the author of Running with Sherman, which is the book that I selected for the series. And this book fills the broad theme of heroism and leadership. And I think it just fits it perfectly. So I wanted to thank everybody for being here. Just a reminder that this conversation is being recorded for his Marginalia podcast. If you have a question, please post it in the chat and we will work it into our conversation. Christopher, the title of your book is Running with Sherman. Perhaps an introduction to Sherman is in order. Can you tell us about when you first met him and perhaps some first impressions?
You know, it's funny because as you're asking the question, out of my left ear, I can hear my daughter Sophie just back behind me. And I'm very tempted to bring her in and turn it over to her. There's no way, she's 16, there's no way in hell she's gonna do it. But so Sherman was a result of a weird series of happy accidents, I guess. We had moved out from Philadelphia to a really remote corner of Pennsylvania years ago because we're living in Philly and we had this romantic notion of like, wouldn't it be live among the Amish out in Amish country in Lancaster? And we looked around, we actually found a house we could afford, just in the middle of nowhere, a place called Peach Bottom, Pennsylvania. And jumped in, my wife and I, and then 2-year-old daughter. We had this adventure for a few years of becoming kind of like homestead farmers surrounded, America's like least industrialized people, the Amish. And we became friends with a lot of our neighbors and started to raise sheep and goats and chickens and turkeys and ducks. And then when my youngest daughter, Sophie, 9 years old, And I made the mistake, and I caution anybody who has a 9-year-old out there, don't follow my folly. Never ask a 9-year-old what they want for their birthday, because they're living in this kind of weird zone where like they understand what's real. They know they can't have a unicorn, but they also don't understand like what's impractical. Like you can't have a jetpack, you know, or a jet ski, or in her case, what she wanted for her 10th birthday was a donkey. She asked for a donkey. And, you know, my first reaction was like, dude, no, you're not getting a donkey. But then I started thinking about it. I'm like, you know, why not? We live on 5 acres. We have pasture. It's kind of cool. And when I asked around, one of my neighbors, a Mennonite neighbor named Wes Metzler, said, actually, I'm really kind of glad you asked, because there's a member of our church who has an animal and we need to get away from him. He's a hoarder and he's got this donkey locked in a stall and we're desperate. And that's basically where Sherman came from. It was my 9-year-old daughter's wacky. It was a neighbor trying to solve a problem himself. And then, you know, a dope from Philadelphia stepping into the middle and ending up with a very sick, very lame donkey on his hands.
Yeah, can you describe like the condition he was in? Because there are pictures in the book that are, they're heart-wrenching, basically.
And this is one of the few times where the pictures really don't do it justice. The first time we saw Sherman, my neighbor Wes, who, you know, again, is a little bit of background. You know, Mennonites and Amish are, I think, one of the few faiths that actually walk the talk. Like they genuinely are, I would say, Christ-like in the way that they are gentle, they're kind, they're honest. These are the principles that they genuinely live by. His problem in this situation was he had a member of his church who was hoarding these animals, but Wes is strictly honest. He doesn't shade the truth. He doesn't dodge it. He tells the truth. And his problem was he had to convince this hoarder to release this animal, even though he didn't want to. The obvious thing to do would make up some kind of BS story, like tell him, hey, he's going to die. But he wasn't going to do that. So Wes's first plan of attack was to take me and my 2 little girls to this guy's house and hope that maybe the sight of these hopeful kids would kind of thaw his heart a little bit. So we drove to the house, and the hoarder, this is where I really learned a lesson about mental health that is easy to say but hard to live. The problem with people with mental health difficulties is they just don't see what we see. So we walked into this guy's barn and it was like Jeffrey Dahmer's house. It was a dungeon. It was dark. It was fetid. The aroma was just awful of manure and rotted hay. It was full of mud. It was just horrible. And he couldn't have been more proud. He off his animals who are in squalor in the darkness. And when he takes us to the stall that the donkey was supposed to be in, we're looking around like, I don't see anything. And then we see this shadow, this gray shadow pressed against the back wall. And my first thought was, I just felt this chill, like, oh my God, don't tell me that's the donkey. But what really doesn't come across from the photos was like the stench of the stall. His skin was literally rotting. His fur was matted. He was up to his knees in rotted straw and manure. It was a really horrifying scene. And I both had the same simultaneous reaction. Was like, number one, oh my God, we don't want this donkey. And number two was, oh my God, we're definitely taking this donkey out of here. And that was the situation he was in. That was the first day. Now, Wes's scheme had worked. He had managed to soften the hoarder enough for him to agree to a 2-year plan. So Wes said to the hoarder, I'm not using his name because I have great sympathy for this guy. He said to the hoarder, tell you what, why don't you take these really adorable girls, take your donkey for 2 years, let them get healthy and strong, and then we'll see what happens. So he agrees to this plan. And the next day, Wes loads the donkey onto the back of a hay wagon and brings it out to our house. And now for the first time, we're actually seeing it under light of day. And as bad as it was yesterday, twice as bad in the daylight. We had never seen its legs and its hooves before. and its hooves had grown out so far they had curled up almost like swim fins or something. And this donkey was splayed out on these long like ski runners and couldn't walk. Its teeth, you could put your fingers in its mouth and just pull a tooth out. That's how rotted his teeth were. And the most horrifying thing was the look in his eye was like fish, just glassy, white, gone, just not there anymore. And I'm looking at this animal and thinking, this is the worst 10-year-old birthday of all time. What have we gotten ourselves into?
And so your daughter, who asked for this present, it was for her 10th birthday.
Yeah.
She's 16 right now?
Now she's 16.
This was 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And so you brought Sherman home, and there were a couple of neighbors who really stepped in to help, because it was questionable whether or not he would even make it the night or the next day or the next week, because he was just in such bad shape. And so that was Scott and Tanya, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Beth, I would love to do some kind of experiment where I could figure something out, because to this day, I don't know if it's that every person reacts more humanely when an animal's in distress, or if it's people who like animals tend to be more humane. Like, which one is it? But what we found uniformly was, in any time, I get glassy eyed whenever I talk about this, whenever we needed help, as soon as we asked, as soon as we knew it was for a distressed donkey, people just dropped everything. It was like ringing the church bell in the little village. And so at the very beginning, so I'm looking, Wes had brought this donkey over. It's on a hay wagon. I'm like, how do you get a donkey who can't walk off of a hay wagon? Like, what's the plan here? And we had to sort of hoist it off, and then it's on the ground, and it's just standing there, just dead to the world. And Wes looked at those hooves, and he goes, I don't know if this thing's ever going to be able to walk. So we had met this woman named Tanya. This is what actually gave Sophie the idea of getting a donkey in the first place. We had met this woman, Tanya, in the woods out where we live, and she was riding a donkey in a saddle out in the woods in the middle of nowhere. I'd never seen anything like it, and we were just enchanted by this woman and her donkey and the saddle, and that's what kind of got the wheels turning in Sophie's head. And so I wanted to give her a call, but I didn't know her last name. I didn't have her phone number. So I called some neighbors, and luckily, if you live in Peach Mountain, Pennsylvania, and you're a woman who rides a donkey in the woods, like, everybody knows who you are. So one phone call later, like, oh yeah, you want Tanya? Here's her number. So I called Tanya, and I said, hey, we're your neighbors. We're over the hill. We got this donkey. And I almost didn't even finish the call. I actually dropped the phone and just got in truck over. Her husband, Scott, is a farrier. He is an expert. So he was the first one there. And again, I'll never forget the look in his eyes. He gets out of the truck and he's all confidence, like, this is what I was born to do. No problem. And he's like, don't worry about it. I've seen everything. And he stops and he looks at the donkey, and I've never seen this before. And he goes, I've never seen that bad ever. He said, what's been happening? I go, I think this thing's been locked in a stall for like 8 years. And he goes, I think at this point, all I do is put it down. I think we're beyond the point of a merciful end. And then he goes, well, I have a hacksaw, which is never an expression you want to hear in a non-carpentry situation. And I go, yeah, I got a hacksaw. He's like, get the saw. So I get the saw. And when I was talking about people dropping everything to help, he gets down on his hands and knees with a donkey who can kick his face off. And he takes the saw, and while he's sawing through these horribly smelly, rotten hooves, he's crooning and talking and bedside. I find remarkable. It took him almost an hour and a half of work, and he managed to cut through these hooves like he was cutting through a piece of like firewood. And he length where maybe it was possible that this animal have a prayer of walking again.
And so before Tanya helped you, I was going to ask you about when she told you to give Sherman a job. You had some help from Lawrence.
Yeah. Yeah, Lawrence. Oh my gravy. So I don't know if you ever go on any kind of social media and you see pictures of like baby goats. You know, people have like cute baby goats and they're jumping around. And it's true. Baby goats are adorable. Bigger goats are a whole different game. So raise into raising animals was to get some sheep. And then we became interested in goats because near us, there's a thing called the Mammoth Annual Goat Races, where people run next to their goats. And we love this idea. So we got ourselves some goats, but I just sort of bought them willy nilly. I didn't know what I was buying. And we got this one called Lawrence. And if I'd done some research in advance, I would have realized that Lawrence is basically one step removed from like an African gazelle. Like he is big and he can jump like crazy. And there is no fence that can keep Lawrence in. But what's interesting, his breed is an Oberhasli. And Oberhaslis are known for two things. One is their extraordinary athleticism. And the second thing is they're extraordinary socializing people. And that combination sounds good, except if you put a fence between Lawrence and someone he wants to see, well, then it's as if this fence wasn't there. So Lawrence was doing, like in the morning, the local kids would gather at the end of our driveway to get the school bus. And Lawrence would see all these like little kids, and he'd be up and over the fence. And then the school bus driver would pull up and open the door, and the kids would get in, and Lawrence would just go tromping on in with them. And I'd be here, this like irate school bus horn honking, have to run outside and drag Lawrence off the bus. So Lawrence was really testing my last nerve. Do we get Sherman? And that first evening, I had Sherman in a separate meadow, and I had the sheep and goats in another meadow. But it was getting dark, and I wanted to bring the sheep and goats back in so they could go into their barn, which meant crossing Sherman's meadow. So I had this whole plan worked out where I would keep the animals away. I didn't want his animal disturbed. And it was a perfect plan, except for Lawrence, who went around me, and he started beelining right for this poor donkey. And I thought he was going to do what he always does, which is just like ram the crap out of him, like bang into him. And before I could catch up, Lawrence caught up with Sherman and just sniffed him and just lay down next to him. And yeah, God, I get so sentimental about this stuff. But that instinct, you know, in this wacky creature to just show kindness and companionship, and it made all the difference. Like that was the key. For the first time in his life, Sherman wasn't alone and despairing. He had this warm-blooded knucklehead next to him that was like by his side.
There were several moments in the book where I teared up. So I might tell you what they are and I might not. So Tanya helped you out with like trying to, how to relate with Sherman. And she told him, you have to give him a job. You have to give him a purpose. And you came up with an idea. When were you first introduced to Borough racing? Was it during the research for your book, Born to Run?
Yeah, but I have to say that picture, there's two pictures of Tanya in the book. And to me, like, I don't know if you had the same impression, but to me, like, that is Tanya. Like, if you had to encapsulate her personality, here she is riding a donkey in a river. Why? Who knows? I don't like it. But she's like laughing. She's strong. You know, there's this like sense of, I'm having a good time, but don't get sideways with me. And to me, that's what Tanya's all about. So you asked about Borough racing. Yeah, what had happened was I had first heard about an indigenous group from Mexico who had come out of extreme isolation to travel to a town in Colorado to run a 100-mile foot race. And when I first heard about this, like a lot of it didn't add up to me. I never knew there were 100-mile races. How does a group from Mexico get to Colorado? How does this tribe even know about this? And so I thought this would be a really cool magazine story to do. So I traveled down to Leadville. And when I got there, the guy who created the race is a guy named Ken Klober. And Ken himself is a force of nature. He's a former hard rock miner who had created this 100-mile race. And you can see all of the ADHD 5-year-old that Ken must have been is still there today. Because when he and I were talking, he was very gracious. He's answered all my questions. He's like, hey, I tell you what, let's go snowshoeing. I'm like, okay. So in the middle of the interview, literally 15 minutes, he's up and we're out the door and we're driving in the mountains and we're snowshoeing. And I'm trying to like write notes with gloves and snowshoes in the mountains. And as we're tromping along, he tells me that the reason he had made Leadville his home was because when he first visited, it was coincidentally during the Boom Days Fair. And the Boom Days Fair championship pack barrel race. And this is a race that harkens back to miners' times, the old prospector days, when miners would strike gold and run down as fast as they could with all their gear loaded on donkeys. So it has become Colorado's state sport, state summertime heritage sport. And so what happens to this day, there are maybe, I forget how many, 8 to 12 towns around Colorado that have an annual Borough race where people show up with a donkey and will run anywhere from 10 to 29 miles on a donkey. So I tried it once because I can, and once is all you need to do when it comes to pack barrel racing. It sucked. It was terrible. Donkey was uncooperative. I'm at 12,000 feet. I can't breathe. I'm in the middle of a stampede. I'm scared. I'm tired. I'm dizzy-headed. Horrible experience. And yet somehow, when I have this donkey Sherman, I start getting this idea of like, you know what, maybe down the line, we could try this.
And so Tanya told you that you had 2 options when it came to training Sherman for this race. And the 2 options were easing and flooding. So I was wondering if you could describe for the audience what those 2 mean. And go ahead and do that first. And then I'll do mine.
I'm currently watching the show Cobra Kai on Netflix, which if you haven't seen it, oh my God, it's amazing. It's so good. But it's reintroducing us, or me at least, to like Mr. Miyagi and all these little sort of aphorisms. And so Tanya was just like this font of aphorismic wisdom. And she had a couple cool things about training donkeys. Her first nugget was, anything you want a donkey to do, you got to make the donkey think that he thought of it first. And the second she said was, anything you start with a donkey, you got to finish. You can't give up in the middle, because if you do, that just tells a donkey like, aha, right? I knew this was a bad idea, and therefore I'm never going to do it now. So that was Tanya's thing. That got us started, which was trying to come up with ways to make Sherman think, like, oh yeah, this is what I really feel like doing. And then even if he balked in the middle, but just gutting it out and getting to the finish line of whatever little task we took on for ourselves that day. And once we started to make a little bit of headway, that's when Tanya said, all right, now you're getting past the point of his fear and injury and reluctance, and you're getting to the point now where you genuinely have a chance to teach this donkey how to be your running partner. And you're going to see lots of these out there how to do it. And one of the main ones is called flooding. And a lot of people will do this when they're training horses or even with dogs. And the idea of flooding is, animals have a highly acute sensory system. They are extremely sensitive to smells and sights and colors and sounds. And so, if you're walking a dog, that dog's radar is everywhere. It's picking up sounds from 7 blocks away. It's picking up the smell of a cat that crossed the street 6 weeks ago. It's picking up all kinds of stuff that we're not. That's when a dog's going down the street. It's seeing everything. And the problem with that is that if a dog is paying attention to the cat scent and the trash can down the street and everything else, it's not paying attention to you. So when you're saying heel, you are about 4th on his list of priorities at that point. And so what people do to overcome that is to flood the animal with sensation, just overwhelm it. And so when you walk them, they'll like bang on lids and make noises and pop off firecrackers, so that when he hears your voice, it learns to cut through the clutter and only pay attention to you. So essentially it's taking the animal and bombarding it with stimulation that gets overwhelmed and kind of jittery, and it looks for a safe harbor, and you become the safe harbor. And it learns that when it hears your voice, that is the one calm thing that knows what's going on. So that's flooding, and it's effective. And Tanya's explaining this to me, and I'm like, okay, all right, flooding. Let's start flooding. And she looks at me like, no, you idiot. We're never doing that. This animal has been abused. I'm not going to bang a trash can lid. I'm going to bang you with a trash can lid. And then she goes, the other way is just suck it up and take your time, and you ease the animal into it. You take as much time as the animal wants. And there's another great Borough philosopher, a guy named Curtis Emery, who's a fantastic Borough racer. And I can't remember his exact phrasing, but basically he says, if you try to hurry the donkey, you lose. You got to be on donkey time. And you got to go into every situation realizing, you know what, however long it takes, that's how long it takes. And that's what we started to do with Sherman. And Tanya's approach was, if we're going to try and get him to walk 10 feet on cement for the first time, it may take a minute, it may take you all afternoon, but you better free up your afternoon. And that was easing. Oh, as we're talking, one of our cats is beelining for me. Anyway, I'm sorry, I got distracted by the cat. So that was Tanya's approach. Tanya's approach was, give it all the time in the world, make this a pleasurable experience, and in the long run, that's going to pay off.
I don't know if you can hear, my cat's been pawing at the door and meowing, trying to get in.
Oh, I wonder if Leo or Sakano heard that, because he just came out of nowhere, just came straight for me.
Well, as she was giving you the options and describing them, I just kept screaming at the book, easing, easing, easing.
Yeah. It should have been obvious, right? But, you know, I was over my head. I thought I was agreeing to what she wanted.
Yeah. You know, you wrote about the effects that animals, I mean, here you were helping Sherman, but the effects that animals have on human beings is remarkable. And you were writing about, you know, like when the sparrow or swallow had made its way into something, and these were the most hardened criminals. And can you tell everybody what happened when they had an accidental animal come in, but then what would happen after that in some of these prison systems?
Yeah, it was such a bizarre story. Actually, I feel like sitting down and writing a made-for-TV movie based on that incident right now. It took place in Lima, Ohio, coincidentally also the home of the series Glee. So Glee, and you had the Lima State Correctional Institute, home for the mentally insane. This was a case that took place back in the 1970s. It's like at the height of lock 'em up era. And there was a prison for the most psychologically disturbed, the most dangerous prisoners. And this is the kind of place where guards only went in under extreme protection, because these guys, you never know, these are a bunch of Hannibal Lecters. And what the warden noticed was, weirdly, like one wing of this prison, things were all of a sudden like kind of chill, like kind of relaxed. You got three wings where they're not getting in a fight with guards, and they're not getting in fights with each other, and people are doing, when there were no incidences on this wing. And that actually made the warden kind of nervous. It probably meant that these guys are like tunneling the hell out of here. So they go in to find out what's going on and do a shakedown. They find out what had happened was a sparrow had flown in, bashed into a wall, and was injured. So one of the prisoners was nursing this thing back to health. And the word spread through the wing, and this thing became the pet of the wing. And that's why everything calmed down. All the prisoners united in a singular purpose of like, we've got to heal the bird. And so the prisoner, you know, when the warden had a choice at that point, right? You can get rid of the bird and, you know, follow the rules, or you can continue this experiment. And he went full on other way, which was, this is a farming community. And he put the word out, any farmers who have any kind of rescue animals they want to get rid of, bring them to Lima. And he started bringing in all kinds of stuff, dog, cats, and goats. And what they found was that the incidence level of acting out just plummeted. The more animals they threw at the problem, the better the behavior became. And this was what began the then nascent field of animal therapy, of using animals to sort of naturally medicate psychological problems.
I just found that fascinating. And a few Sue Stuart Smith about a book that she wrote called The Well-Gardened Mind. And they had gardening as part of prison reform. And maybe I'm just perhaps too invested in prison reform that I would just related with what you wrote about. But I do want to touch on that, in that how this animal therapy can help humans, because it certainly helped one of your married band of 3 or 6 or whatever. I mean, talk to us about Zeke and
Wow.
how Sherman and working with you and Mika and Flower and Matilda, how that helped Zeke.
Yeah, Zeke. Well, I'm going to cut way ahead for you, Beth. I'm going to give you a spoiler, and I don't think it'll make an impression on anybody else who hasn't read the book yet. But for you personally, Zeke is doing awesome these days, by the way. He's on his way at this moment to Berkeley to be a PhD candidate, and I don't know what he's doing. He's like making artificial brains or something, but he's doing awesome these days. But at the time of this story, Zeke was going through one of those really heartbreakingly baffling situations that people get into, like, you know, Anthony Bourdain. You look at Anthony Bourdain, this is a line cook who suddenly had his dream come true, and he becomes this amazing celebrity chef who's like eating noodles with Barack Obama in Saigon and living this amazing life, and yet still in touch with what he left behind. So you think this guy's got it all. Celebrity girlfriend and, you know, wonderful life, and he's eating for a living on television. and he kills himself. He dies. Yeah. And it's one of these things where no one can explain it. And this is a situation that Zeke found himself in. I almost wish I had Zeke right here to put him on camera, because the dude is so effortlessly charming. He's handsome as hell. He's ripped. He's athletic. He's so freaking kind. He's a wonderful guy. People love this kid, and it's never gone to his head. And same for his sister. Super academically, like super achievers academically, but they both have had extremely dangerous battles with depression that came very close to ending both of their lives. So we're friends with his mom, and his mom called me up just coincident while we were just beginning the situation with the donkeys, and we hadn't even talked to anybody about it. We're just playing around with these donkeys, and coincidentally I get a phone call from Zeke's mother, Andrea, saying, hey, Zeke's home from school and he's hoping to do some running. Could he come over and listen to this? Like, what? Zeke's home from school? Zeke's never home from school. He's a sophomore at Penn State. He's straight like AAA student. So something sounded wrong. And when we got to get together with them, they explained what had happened. And he had been institutionalized because of his very difficult situation with depression. And now he was trying to do everything possible, because it was his second go round. And so now he was trying to do everything he could. Besides therapy and medication, he really wanted to find correlation between outdoor exercise and abatement of depression and symptoms. And so he wanted to run. So I said, yeah, listen, dude, you're happy to run with us, but we're happy to have you run with us, but we got these donkeys we're dealing with. So are you cool with this? And he's like, yeah, whatever. So Zeke signed on. And again, I'm just out of my depth. Still winter. It's freezing in Pennsylvania. We got snow on the ground. To keep this donkey alive and train for this race. And now I got a wonderful friend's kid, and we're trying to keep him alive and get him running. And every day is just like, I don't know which foot to start off with. And it turns out that Zeke ended up being the perfect tool for the situation, because he's extremely consistent. He's very disciplined. And I remember him kind of looking around and going, okay, well, I think someone here has to be consistent and punctual. It's obviously not going to be this guy. So it's going to be me. So Zeke's over. So every day, you know, if we said like 9 o'clock start time, 8:50, Zeke's rolling up the driveway, like ready to go, no matter what the weather was. And he joined this band. And at the time, again, I am very new to this stuff. I've never done it before. I learned a lot subsequently about how powerfully medicinal animal contact is for people with mental health difficulties, but I didn't know at the time. But all we all saw was, from the first day, Zeke just improved dramatically. He just felt his shoulders relax and his head come up and smile on his face. Again, you know, if you look back anthropologically, this makes sense. You know, animals were our first partners. They were our first alarm systems out in the wild. And so we are hardwired to feel relaxed and safe when animals are around us. It's still in our DNA. I didn't know this, but we saw it happen with Zeke in front of our eyes, and it was mind blowing.
Well, and it was the contact with the animal, but also the exercise again, the endorphins, because Zeke and his sister, they both had, when they were swimmers in high school, they would have the 2-hour workout in the morning and the 2-hour workout at the end of the day. And I think, didn't that have an effect on, I mean, on abating the depression during that time? And then the depression reared its ugly head when they quit swimming?
Yeah, again, this is all brand new. Andrea, that first sort of gave me the thought about this, because she's a nurse herself and could not believe that the kids that she had raised so well, with such loving attention, were struggling with this ailment. And in her research, she started to wonder, she thought, I wonder if they're not going through withdrawal. They had been high nationally ranked swimmers, but as kids, like 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. And in high school, they stopped swimming. And not long after, they started battling with depression. And Andrea started to do research. And you see it now, people like Michael Phelps are speaking more and more now about their own depression challenges. And it is curious, it's about swimming too. And I wonder if it's because swimming is such a solitary sport that in other activities, you at least see humans, you hear sounds. But when you swim, it's the only sport where you're locked inside your own bubble. And so all you have is your own thoughts and this endorphin high. And that if you step away from it, suddenly your body is deprived of that experience and that drug, that neurological drug. And so there has been a increasing correlation between people in competitive swimming and battles with depression.
So you and Zeke and Mika and the 3 donkeys, Sherman, Matilda, and Flower, all started training a race in Colorado, the World Championships. What was the timing from when you decided to do this, maybe when Zeke started training with you, and when the race was? How much of a time gap was there between that?
So let's see if I got this right. So, so we got Sherman in, when was it? It was right around end of summer, like September. I forget the year now, but it was 2015? Yeah, September 2015, we get Sherman. And we spent that fall just kind of trying to get him healed and get him to walk. And then Tanya went through some really crippling personal problems of her own that winter. And then, of course, it is winter, so buckets of snow. And it was to run the race the following July. So we were starting in September. I'm trying to get it around to July, racing the clock. A lot of things put us back. And then when Zeke showed up in February, we had whatever the countdown clock was at that point, maybe 5 months before a 29-mile race at 12,000 feet in Colorado. And at that point, I think our odds are almost, diminishing by the day. And that's what we're looking at it. So it's basically from February of 2016 until March until July of 2016. That was our window.
I didn't ever get my mind wrapped around how much you were training and when you started putting in the long distances and when you were doing hill training and workouts. And so I just appreciate that perspective. But when you started doing, this book was filled with little vignettes, almost little mini magazine articles throughout about different Borough racing or different people who you had met at different stages of training with Sherman. And one that really got, that captured my attention and imagination and, squeezed on my heart a little bit was Hal.
Yeah.
And his son Harrison.
Yeah. And
I'm just turning to this page 196. Sorry, should have had this ready. So Hal had been Borough racing before Harrison was born, right?
Right.
And Harrison was born, he's autistic, or I'm not saying the wrong thing here. He's on the.
No, you're right. Hal likes to use neurologically diverse.
Thank you.
As a phrase? Yeah.
Well, the sentence that I underlined said, it all made sense when Harrison was born. Hal thought he'd gotten pretty good at training donkeys. He never realized they were training him. Can you talk to me a little bit about Hal and Harrison, their journey?
I can talk to you a lot about how Harrison, their journey. I like those people so much in that community because they're so not what you expect. Hal is a rough and tough dude. You know, he is pure backcountry Colorado, you know, front range kind of guy. But around his son and around donkeys, he is just so tender and so patient. Around everybody, actually. Very, very tender and patient and sweet. And his best friend, Curtis Imrie, who passed away not long ago, real heartbreak. But Curtis was Hal times 10. Rough and tough and, you know, kind of guy where he would bang up his knee and just wipe off the blood and get back at it again. But around Harrison, Curtis was endlessly loving and patient. But let me sort of backtrack the story a little bit. So, you know, Hal had grown up in Colorado and was in college, and Curtis was a longtime burro racer, about 10 years older than Hal. And Curtis had heard that there's a really good runner at University of Colorado Boulder. So he gets Hal's number and said, hey, look, we got this burro race coming up. I got an extra donkey I need a runner for. You want to try it? And so Hal shows up and he tries it. And my experience was the same as his. He hated it. He was awful. He finished last. And I think Curtis would say he finished last for like 10 years. He was constantly bad at it. And Hal's difficulty was that he was an amazingly talented natural runner. I mean, he's a sub 3 hour marathoner. And the problem with is this is a team sport. And so you're not going to make the donkey do what you want. You got to figure out how to partner with the donkey or you're going to be last all the time. And a lot of the other burro racers like Curtis weren't nearly as gifted as runners as Hal was. So for them, they were very happy to focus their attention on the donkey, to getting the donkey to maneuver the way they wanted to and turn. And they were happy to draft behind the donkey, let the donkey set the pace. Hal is way faster. He knows he can win this thing if only the goddamn donkey would just keep up. And so for 10 years, it's this tug of war between the two indomitable wills. And when it finally clicked, when Hal finally got it, that you have to partner. And to partner with the donkey, you know, it's going to sound simple, but to actually do it, it's really kind of complicated because you are trying to understand a nonverbal. I mean, imagine we're talking, and I am sure already between you and I, Beth, there are misunderstandings. Things I'm saying to you, you're hearing different than I intend. Imagine doing this with a 1,000-pound animal with giant ears who are trained to stay away from creatures like you. So what he had to do was really shut down his race instinct and activate his training instinct. And once he did that, Hal was a professional racer into his 50s. He's beaten guys in his 20s that are, you know, 240 marathoners with very fast donkeys. But Hal became this amazing burro trainer. And then when his son Harrison was born, all those things we talked about earlier about anything you want, and I don't mean this in any way to be demeaning. The lessons of patience and of deep empathy that worked with the burros, he found extraordinarily useful in dealing with Harrison, with a young boy with great strength and will who couldn't communicate in a way that Hal could understand. And what Hal understood was, all right, all these years of learning that if you want to work with somebody, make sure that they think it's their idea. To give yourself all the time in the world. Don't put somebody else on your own schedule. All those things had prepared him for the challenges of raising a boy like yeah.
You know, some like Cal, who was older than and beating some of the younger gentlemen running. You also wrote in the book about women and women as burro racers. And why are women so skilled at this sport?
I don't know, but man, I wish I could find out. I have a theory about this, Beth. It's kind of actually my sort of universal athletic theory, my universal sports theory. It comes down to this, is that, we've been acculturated to believe that sports are the things you see on TV. It's dudes bashing dudes, right? It's like football, hockey, basketball, boxing, MMA. Sports is dominated by dudes and dude stuff. But when you look at all these things, and if you put them into the animal kingdom, we kind of suck at all of them. So if you look at a professional athlete, well, they're fast, they're strong, and they're tough. Well, not compared to like a gorilla. A gorilla is faster, stronger, and tougher than any athlete. Cheetahs are way faster. Squirrels are, you could never even catch a squirrel if you wanted to. Squirrels are faster than Usain Bolt. And so what we've done is men have created sports in their own image. Men have taken the attributes of male physiology and created activities that separate them from women. But these are not things that humans do naturally that we're good at. So again, humans are not particularly strong, fast, but as the species go, men, because of testosterone, tend to be larger, have more muscle mass, and have more explosive power than women. But compared to other creatures, we're not strong or fast at all. These activities are not things that humans naturally evolved to be good at. We didn't evolve to be really good at being strong or being fast. What humans evolved to be really good at is endurance activities and cooperative activities. So if you put humans up against gorillas and gazelles, we suck. But if we're running long distances, we are the best on the planet. We can outrun any other creature at long distances for two basic, simple reasons. One is because we're bipedal. We're upright, and so we have much more, basically human pogo sticks. So rather than being elongated, we are vertical, and we're full of rubbery tissue. So we basically can bounce along. And the second crucial factor is that we vent heat by perspiring as opposed to respiring. We vent that heat by sweating instead of breathing. So you take a dog, you take a cheetah, you take on a hot day, and when they're running, there's a certain point where they're panting because that's their only way of venting that heat. We don't pant, we just sweat more. And so that gave us this remarkable advantage out in the wild. We could run long, we could do it cooperatively. And as a group, we could run other animals into heat exhaustion. But the key word there is group, because you can't do it by yourself. If I go out and chase a gazelle, it doesn't matter what kind of marathon time I can run, I'm not catching the gazelle. But there's like 10 of us, men and women combined, and we're all out there running this thing and cutting off its angles of escape. We will run that thing into heat submission. So you asked a simple question, and I made it into a freaking PhD treatise, which is that why are women so good at barrel racing? I think the reason why it's not that women are good at barrel racing, it's that men and women are really good at the things that we naturally evolved to do, not the stuff we made up to put on TV on Sundays so dudes can watch beer, drink beer and watch each other. We're really good at, as a species together, men and women, is running long distances cooperatively. And so if you go into ultra marathons, 50 to 100 miles, the differences between men and women are minimal. Dudes all the time. Longer distances, 30, 40, 50 miles, women are right up there in the front of the pack, if not actually winning. Now you add the next component, which is time to a donkey, and you have a whole other thing entirely. And I don't want to get too speculative about whether women are more, maternal or the rest of it. That's just pure speculation on my part. But one thing that is clearly observable is the problem that took Hal 10 years to solve, like how to suppress his own ego and then become a trainer. Barb Dolan solved it in like a month. So she came to barrel racing from competitive cycling and very quickly became one of the best in the world, not one of the best flat out in the world, very quickly.
We selected this book to go with the broad theme of heroism and leadership. And, there are quite a few heroes I can put that just keeps sticking out in my mind is Mika, is your wife, who didn't really sign up for any of this, but was there for every step of the way. I'm sure you'll say you agree with that, but In terms of heroism and leadership, who in this book, other than your wife, shines out to you as a hero?
I think you were right on the money when you started with her. No, for sure, for sure. And, you know, I think sometimes you get so used to someone's extraordinary abilities that you take them for granted. And every once in a while you have a moment of reawakening, you know, your eyes open up like, oh my God, she didn't have to do this. What is she doing here? You know, being out cornfield and it's 100 degrees and the donkeys have decided they're not running anymore to 5 miles from home and the flies are biting. And this woman grew up at the beach in Hawaii and now she's on a cornfield in Peach Bottom, Pennsylvania. And I'm looking going, boy, your life took a tragic turn, didn't it? when you met me. But no, kidding aside, I learned a ton about her from her in the sense that it begins and ends always. If you can't sympathize, then it doesn't matter, right? You could be Dwayne Johnson, man. You could be the toughest, strongest guy in the world. But if you don't give a shit, then you're not a hero. And that's where it always begins. Honestly, if you want to look at the three-legged stool of heroism, you know, it's you know, brains, it's brawn, and it's heart. That's the trio. And if you had to pick one, it has to be heart, because the other two are meaningless if the person doesn't want to get involved. And without fail, every step, no matter what it was, she was always right in there without question. And the only person with a smile on her face who reminded us that this is fun. And because I'll tell you, a lot of it wasn't fun. Dragging donkeys into a creek, donkeys who are afraid of water, to teach them this is what you're gonna have to do for this race. It ain't fun, but she was always in it. And yeah, so Mika, off the charts, a human lesson in heroism. And yeah, to tell you the truth, I mean, if you want to do an all-star list of the heroes of this book, think about it. Mika, it's Tanya, it's the Virginia ladies, you know, and then Karen. So again, this is one of these things where I'm putting up the distress call because a lot of things went wrong in that last month, as you know. And we found ourselves with a few weeks to go with no way of getting these donkeys to Colorado. We have 3 donkeys. We got to get them 3,000 miles. I don't have a clue. And I put things out in the grapevine. I get a call from this woman in Virginia, and she says she'll do it. And I don't know who she is, but I got no plan B. And same thing. These 2 women come rocking up. So Linda at the time was 72. Karen, I think, was 58. They pull into my driveway, and they're all like, 5'2". And I'm looking at them. I'd never seen them before, and I'm like so disappointed. I was really expecting some like Linda, you know, what's a Ronda Rousey's, you know. I was hoping for some like 6'2" muscle-bound women, and I got these like 2 5'2" dumplings from Virginia, and I'm like, oh crap. And I'll tell you what, I'm only going to the house get my stuff, and then I'll come out and I'll load the donkeys. And I'm like, oh, we got it. And I'm like, you're not getting it. Those donkeys have never been in a trailer. It's not going to happen. I come out of the house 10 minutes later, and the donkeys are in the trailer. And somehow they loaded them up, and I'm looking at Linda, and she's like throwing these 50-pound bales of hay over her head, loading up the truck, and then Karen's like, let's go. Burning daylight, let's go. Like, wow. And that's what it was like the rest of the time. So we disagreed on everything under the sun, but they were always so honest and compassionate and up for anything that, again, it was one of these things where you feel like you're being swept along by somebody else's, like, you know, force of nature.
I do have a couple of questions from our audience. At what point in the journey did you, at what point in the journey with Sherman did you decide to write a book?
Very late, and very late in the process, because it was unusual for me, because usually you get this idea and you sort of, you know, stress test it and you think, hey, this could probably be a book, and you plant your calendar, and you come into it with a pretty well realized plan of attack. And this was a thing where I remember vividly, because it happened when I was outside the dentist's office and I didn't feel like going inside, and my phone rang. Oh, cool. I'll just kill some time talking to whoever the hell this is. And it turned out to be my editor at the New York Times, Tara Parker Pope. And she called up just to sort of check in. I hadn't done anything for her in a while. And I said, yeah, listen, I'm going to be off the radar for a while. We got this donkey and we're trying to do this stuff with it. And she's like, man, that's going to be a great book. I'm like, it's not going to be a book, Tara. This thing isn't even going to live. And she's like, that's why it's going to be a great book. And her thought was, you don't know what the ending is. You don't know where this is going. And it's very rare in life. You can chronicle a mystery as it's unfolding. Usually you find the corpse and you work your way backwards. So there isn't even a corpse yet. You don't know what's going to happen. So it was Tara's very smart idea to start conceiving of this as a story. And this is early on. This is when we were just starting off trying to see if Sherman could even walk. And that's when I thought, okay, let's start taking notes, gathering info, and see where it leads.
Another question. You and I had a chance to talk before we started this, so I know where you are, but Lori wants to know what's new with Sherman today.
Well, I can't answer as of today. So here's what happened. My wife grew up in Hawaii, and we always had this thought that someday, in the future, maybe we'll move back to Hawaii, because she only planned to be in Pennsylvania for 1 year. And then when COVID struck this summer, we suddenly got this idea, because back then Hawaii had zero, like April through June, 0 infections. So we thought, what if, is it possible? And our first challenge was good home for these donkeys. And that's not easy, because 2 other donkeys fly over Matilda, and this gang of 3, man, they were inseparable. So we called our new farrier, Leslie, and said, hey, Leslie, by any chance, could you ask around and see if anybody you know could possibly take care of the donkeys? And she's like, right here, I'll take them. And instantly, so the problem we thought was going to be the biggest problem turned out to be the easiest. Leslie said, I'll take them. She's 130 acres, 5 other donkeys. She's starting an animal therapy practice where she's going to bring people out who want to spend time with animals and let them walk with the donkeys or run with them. And my Amish friends who have a running club, they know Leslie as well. And so she's kind of partnered up with the Amish dudes. So believe it or not, somewhere in the hinterlands of Pennsylvania, there is this joint cooperative project between a farrier and a bunch of donkeys and a bunch of Amish distance runners that are providing animal therapy. So that's where the donkeys are today. And we are sitting in the middle of Oahu, Hawaii, as of last month.
Well, we are at the end of our hour, but I do want to wrap it up with one question. I felt like there were many, there were lessons to be learned as you were training and working with Sherman, but so many of them I felt like they would reflect well as a life lesson for humans. And I think one of my favorite was, anything you start, you have to finish. Do you have any nuggets that stick with you and that would reflect that you felt was a lesson for you than for Sherman?
Yeah, think about how many times you're either facing a situation that you don't want to be involved in, or you're having a conversation that you don't like, or how many times you let a call go to voicemail because you just don't want to deal with it. And you pull the ripcord and escape. And that is the thing I learned from dealing with the animals, is that, you can turn your back on them, but they're still out there and they're waiting for you and they're relying on you, and you have to engage and you got to follow through. So it's all today, but it is that lesson that you have this connection to other people. And if you want to go well, you just got to stick with it and engage. You can't just pull the ripcord and bail. And in the middle of a conversation, even though you really mean to say something else. And so that's the lesson I'm trying to apply, which is that stick with it, stay with it, and bring it to the end. And then you start, bring it to the finish.
Dawn says, lead from behind.
Yeah. Isn't that something, though? Isn't that kind of cool? It gets back to that idea of make the other person think it's their idea, and then you'll get what you want.
Well, Jana, if it's okay with you, I think if anybody would like to turn on their cameras and their microphones and maybe ask a quick question, we'll wrap this up in a few minutes, but I don't want to just have this be all about me, Chris. So I think Jana can hear me.
I can't. I,
Oh, sorry. I didn't give you any heads up for that.
does anyone want to join in? So quiet with all of you out there.
I'm gonna start calling names. I'm gonna start picking people out. I mean, if I can figure out how to do this. Oh, gallery. Right?
Do you text?
No, that's not working. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Do I text?
Do you text? Oh, Cheryl raised her hand. Yeah. Did I read in the book that you do not text?
Yeah. You know, I just started recently.
Oh.
I started a year and a half ago, and I regret every second of it. I tried to make it as unpleasant as possible. My indicator for texting is a pack of coyotes howling, as a way of making the experience so unpleasant for everyone around me that no one will text me. So I do, but I can't stand it. Oh, Cheryl bailed.
Cheryl's going to join us.
Okay.
Okay.
Cheryl,
I don't know what I'm on right now, but I lived in Hawaii for 25 years before returning to Kansas to help with my father, and I retired here. And I'm sorry you got to Oahu right in the middle of their being at their worst with the pandemic. Anyway, you have any comments about that?
Oh, well, sure. Where were you from in Hawaii?
Well, I lived on Oahu.
Yeah, whereabouts?
Well, I lived up on the Poly Highway in Nu'uanu.
Okay. We're down in Kailua, right between Kalama's Beach Park and Kailua
Oh, I know.
Beach Park.
I know every place pretty well. My
Yeah.
my daughter moved back there to teach because she grew up in Hawaii. Both my kids did. But I hear from my friends there that the state has not done very well with their COVID stuff. But I don't want to get stuck on that. But I'm fascinated by your book, and I'm going to recommend it to several people, and I have not read it, but I will order it from wherever Ulrich said to order it. And I really appreciated it. I worked with special education kids for 33 years. And so I understand the importance of tuning into what the kid or the animal or whatever needs.
Yeah, I can imagine your case too. You must have learned that lesson better than most people of observing right before jumping in.
Right. And just, you know, there is no singular way to teach special education kids. You really need to look at what their need is. But anyway, I got
Sure.
my math.
Did you ever have a chance? Did you ever have a chance to introduce animals to the classroom?
Well, our kids took the, I can't remember what it's called, but we took them out to the Kailua side or Kaneohe side, and we put them on horses for a special duck riding therapy. You know, whatever it took. We took them to the Honolulu Zoo, which is really nice, and the petting zoo, and whatever it took, you know.
Yeah, that's terrific. I bet the kids must have just gloried in it.
Well, and the you know, I don't know what's happened to all that, because I do go back consistently since I have a daughter there and a granddaughter. But wow. Anyway, I just am thrilled that and I'm going to go buy the book, and I'm going to buy it where the Ulrich Museum thinks I should buy it. And I'm
Cheryl, when you come back to visit, track me down from my website, and I'd be happy to sign it for you.
Okay, well, that would be great. And I have several people I want to promote your book with, too.
Well, thanks, Cheryl.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Okay, well, I do not see any other hands. Lori says I have to jump, but thank you for writing the book. I learned so much about so many things, and it was a wonderful feel-good story. So I just want to thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. It was a true pleasure.
Oh, I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Jana, and thank you, Beth.
Yeah, thank you, Christopher. It was great.
All
So
right.
many stories.
Yeah. All right, cool. Hope we can do it again sometime.
Absolutely.
Okay, very good.
I hope so.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.